Brett Hosking, Chair of Grain Growers Limited. Great to have you back with us on Flow.
Always a pleasure, Ricky. Thanks for having us.
Now, let's talk first of all about the weather. I know farmers watch the sky pretty closely. Is there some nervousness, especially with the rainfall that's been seen in South Australia, about how things might go in Victoria?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the whole of the east coast of Australia is just feeling very nervous at the moment, or the grower community. We've seen some storms go through WA and they've been hit and miss over there. Some have got it, some have sailed through without it. South Australia's had a little bit of a touch-up over the past few days, or a bit more than a touch-up. And now it's the very east coast turn. So Victoria, we're bracing over the next day or so. And parts of New South Wales, we've heard reports of in excess of 100 mils of rain and flash flooding. So it's not what we want to hear right on the cusp of harvest, but we farm in the Australian climate, and that's what we get dished up sometimes.
Yep, that's the answer I expected on that front. But where, in the, say, the western parts of Victoria, where is the crop sort of sitting at this point in time, and how harmful will the rain be if you say you have sort of 30 or so mils at this point? Yeah,
so we're probably not in a terrible position to be getting the rain in Victoria. So northwest Victoria, the Victorian Mallee, is just starting up now. So we've seen a few headers start rolling in the last week or so, in between showers of rain. Wimmera is still not quite there yet. So I guess our biggest concern is that the crops are probably still green enough to withstand a little bit of weather, which is fortunate. But if we start to get, damaging wind, hail, heavy rain that might flatten crops, that's when it becomes a much, much more of a challenge. So hopefully we'll see a little bit of rainfall. Hopefully we'll see no rainfall, but if we are going to see it, hopefully we see a little bit pass through and not come fairly gently and move on to New Zealand or wherever it's headed after us. So we'll wait and see what happens.
Yep. Now, on that front, you talk about a bit of harvesting starting over in the Mallee. How's it gone when it comes to securing the labour needed for harvest? Have people had to find some cunning sort of workarounds to get the job done?
Yeah, farmers are innovators. There's no doubt about that. And I think at this point, most farmers have been able to secure the workforce they need. And juggling all sorts of challenges like borders not being able to be crossed, and then suddenly being able to be crossed, and workers having to be vaccinated, and all of that thrown into the mix. But we've heard some really innovative solutions, such as, for instance, I heard of one grower who had a local school teacher who was knocking off after classes and going and sitting on a header just so that the grower could have a bit of a break and go home and have a bit of a dinner and rest up for the next day, which are good. It's good to see growers doing things like that.
Yeah, sitting in the cab marking assignments or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I guess it's that time of year too when for a lot of school teachers, exams for senior students are finishing up, so maybe they're finding a little bit more free time on their hands of an evening as well, hopefully so, and it's a good win-win situation for both.
Yeah, so the farmers haven't necessarily been hammered too much with the absence of workers coming in on an ag visa or Pacific Islanders or that sort of thing, because it's really, you need those sort of qualified operators who've got an understanding of working a heavy vehicle.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had this real, and it's a really mutually beneficial relationship with Northern Hemisphere growers. So Canada, the EU, even the Ukraine and that, where in our off-season, our workers go over there and drive their machines, and in their off-season, they come over here and do the same for us. And you've got this essentially a professional header driver who's travelling the world and doing what they do best. And unfortunately, COVID has meant we've lost that. Hopefully we'll get it back soon, but it's really important for, I think, our industry, but also our colleagues in the Northern Hemisphere as well, that we have something like that in place.
And also just on that harvesting front, when it comes to fatigue, the concern we've sort of expressed on the air was that if you haven't been able to find a workaround to get your crop off, some farmers will just keep going around the clock. Is it a bit late now to make any other alternate plans to get through it? Is there a risk there that some might just go a bit too hard?
Yeah, look, it's always a risk. As growers, we take a lot of pride in what we do, and particularly when we see storm fronts come and we think, I don't want the quality of what I've put in the entire year to produce. I don't want the quality of that downgraded. I want to make sure I'm producing the best product I possibly can. Then there's that self-motivation to get the job done and get the crop off. But managing fatigue is really, really important, and managing safety on farm is really, really important. We know we're in one of the most dangerous industries that you can be in, which is why we need to take a bit of extra care. So just taking the time to do the job properly. And you know what? It's very rare we have a season where we don't get the crop off, but it does feel like it's a panic every year at around this time. So encouraging growers just to think before you jump into a job, but most importantly, make sure that you go home at night safely.
And I saw some comments, I think, on social media from you, and we spoke on the Flow about it last week, I think it was, and with Thomas Elder Markets' Andrew Whitelaw about input costs for farmers going into next year. Indeed, South Korea's flying an air tanker in to get some urea. We talked about urea for Korea for next. There's a lot of demand for fertiliser, for instance. How are farmers going to need to prepare for next year?
Yeah, well, there's some big crops coming off, so they'll take some nutrients out of the soil and they need to be replaced. What we do know is that fertiliser is going to be tight and it's probably going to be expensive. So we've been encouraging growers to get out and be proactive and talk to their suppliers and make sure first and foremost that they will actually get their fertiliser, because that's the most important thing. And price, of course, is secondary. If they can get it for a good price, and that's a win-win. But I think they're going to be paying more than what they're used to, but making sure first and foremost that they have the inputs they need, and that applies to chemicals. It even applies to fuel during harvest at the moment. So we're encouraging growers. It's the last thing you want to think about when you've got a harvest to get off, but you really need to be on the phone to your inputs providers and making sure you've got all of your inputs that you need.
Brett Hosking from Grain Growers, thanks very much for the conversation today. We appreciate your time.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having us on, Ricky.